here has ever seen an ostrich egg. An ostrich egg is rather a wonderful sight. That's why I wear a hat. I hate going about naked. I'd like to sing you now a little song which was sung many years ago in the reign of that very famous French queen called Queen Apple Charlotte, of whom you've probably heard. I'd like to tell you a little story about this queen before I sing you the song that was sung in her era. She was a very large woman, and she was sitting on her throne just one day, watching a conjurer, a magician conjure, and he was changing fire into water, and water into fire, and snake into a rope, and a rope into a snake, and he noticed that the queen was wearing two glorious rings, an emerald and a sapphire, and he asked whether he might borrow these rings, and the queen, who was a very large woman, as I said before, was sitting with her hands on her lap. She hadn't seen the rings for a long time, but she said that she would lend him the rings. So she took them off, and he took them back to his little table, and he pounded them up in a mortar until they were a powder, and he threw the result out of the Dutch, German, or French windows. Then he came back to the table, and he went on changing fire into water, water into fire, snake into a rope, rope into a snake. The queen got very bored and also very anxious about her rings, and said so to the Lord High Chief Chamberlain, who went all round the court saying, "Où sont les bagues de la reine? Oh mon Dieu, quelle moquerie, je suis fâché, où sont les bagues de la reine?" By the way, that does not mean where are the bags of the queen. I do hope I said that in the nick of time. I mean, I should hate to make a bloomer. Finally, he came to the table of the magician himself, and he said to the magician, "Où sont les bagues de la reine, monsieur?" And the magician, who spoke equally good French, being a Frenchman, said, "Ich habe ganz vergessen, ich bin sehr traurig." And he went to the window, and he said, "Abracadabra," in Persian oil, and in flew a dove with a dark blue ribbon round its neck, because Oxford had won, and on the ribbon were the two rings of the queen intact. And he took the rings off the ribbon, gave them to the queen, and the queen said, "You are the most marvelous magician of all times. You're the greatest magician. You deserve a reward for being such a great magician, and I will give you that reward." So saying, the queen placed a lily-white hand down the bosom of her corsage and pulled out two armchairs, a sofa, and a yo-yo. Anyway, it was in her reign that this little song was originally sung, in French, translated by me. If you want to hear a story of many years ago, gather round, good children, I'll tell you all I know. It's all about a princess who didn't quite behave, and how a naughty ogre took the princess to his cave, and how the little princess was rescued by a prince, and how they've been so very, very happy ever since. Extraordinary, wonderful, fascinating, queer, marvelous, incredible. Oh, dear, dear. Now, the princess was an orphan, but she couldn't be the queen, because they wouldn't let her be till she was 17. She was only 7, and her life they tried to guard with 2 soldiers in her nursery and another in the yard. Whenever she went out for walks, it was really even worse. She had 20 men on horses, a sergeant and a nurse. Extraordinary, wonderful, fascinating, queer, marvelous, incredible. Oh, dear, dear. Now, she got very tired of this. And one day in a wood, she whispered to her teddy bear, "I'm tired of being good." The day was very hot, you see, and as they lay in rows, the 20 men, the horses, and the sergeant had a doze. The princess smiled a little as she watched them where they lay. Then she shouted, "Kiss me, sergeant," and she quickly ran away. Extraordinary, wonderful, fascinating, queer, marvelous, incredible, oh dear, dear. The sergeant thought it was a dream and brushed away a thorn. But the third man from the left woke up and said, "I say, she's gone." Meanwhile, little princess had run so very far, she'd reached what's called the blooming place where all the ogres are. A horrid ogre saw her. He said, "You'll do for me. I'm getting tired of sardines. I'll have you for my tea." Extraordinary, wonderful, fascinating, queer, marvelous, incredible, oh dear, dear. Now, in another country lived a prince, and strange to tell, he had a water pistol, and other toys as well. And a fairy in his garden said, "Prince, go in and dress, and go into the wood and save a princess in distress." The prince obeyed the fairy, as even princes do. He took the fairy's good advice, he took his pistol too. Extraordinary, wonderful, fascinating, queer, marvelous, incredible, oh dear, dear. He found her tied up to a tree, and feared not in the least, though he saw that she was guarded by a simply beastly beast. He said, "Princess, I've come here to rescue you." He looked right at the monster and wondered what to do. The dragon, all afire, was breathing flames out of its snout, so he took his water pistol and he put the dragon out. Extraordinary, wonderful, fascinating, queer, marvelous, incredible, oh dear, dear. The ogre didn't hear him. The ogre's name was Jeff. He happened to be sleeping. He was also rather deaf. So the prince untied the princess and returned none the worse to the 20 men on horses, the sergeant and the nurse. Much later they got married, but they do not live alone. They're princes and princesses of their very, very own. Extraordinary, wonderful, fascinating, queer, marvelous, incredible, oh dear, dear. There will now be some dancing on the green sward.